It was supposed to be an ordinary summer morning in 1977. The sky above Oregon was pale blue, the kind that promised a long, easy day on the road. I remember standing there, backpack over my shoulder, thumb out, waiting for a ride that never should have stopped. When the blue van slowed beside me, I didn't think twice. A young couple inside, a baby in the woman's arms. It looked safe. They smiled, and I smiled back. That was the moment everything in my life split in two, before and after. As I climbed inside, I had no idea that this ride would last for 7 years. At first, it felt harmless. The man behind the wheel introduced himself politely, his wife soft-spoken and kind. They asked where I was headed, and I told them, just north, a few towns away. The baby cooed in her lap, and the smell of the van was warm, almost comforting. But soon, I noticed the way he kept looking at me through the rearview mirror. Not casual glances, something else. Something that made the air inside grow colder. The road narrowed, the trees got taller, and the world outside turned quiet. No more houses. No gas stations. No signs of life. I asked where we were, but he just said, almost there. Almost where? His wife didn't meet my eyes. That was the first time my instinct screamed at me to run. But I didn't. Not yet. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was how calm they both looked, like they'd done this before. The van turned off the main road and onto a dirt path hidden behind the trees. Branches scraped against the windows as we drove deeper into nowhere. When the engine finally stopped, I saw it, a small, decaying house surrounded by silence. The kind of place that looked forgotten by time. He opened the door for me and smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile you return. His wife stepped out too, holding the baby close to her chest, eyes fixed on the ground. I asked again where we were. He said softly, home. And something in the way he said it told me this wasn't his home, it was his cage. The air smelled like old wood and damp earth. Every step I took toward that house felt like a step away from the world I knew. When he told me to go inside, I hesitated. But his expression didn't leave room for choice. And when I crossed that threshold, I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. The inside of the house was worse than it looked outside. Dark, narrow hallways. Walls that seemed to breathe with the wind. He led me down a short corridor toward a locked wooden door. His wife followed behind, quiet as a shadow. The smell changed, musty, cold, metallic. When he opened that door, I saw stairs leading down into darkness. He said, "You'll be safe here." But everything in me screamed that safety wasn't what he meant. I looked back once. His wife was standing at the top of the stairs, her face pale, holding the baby. Her eyes told me what her voice never did, "You have no idea what's coming." And she was right. The basement was small, concrete walls, one flickering bulb, and a silence that felt alive. I could see a large wooden box in the corner, reinforced with metal on the edges. He walked toward it like it was something sacred. "This," he said quietly, "is where you'll stay." My knees went weak. I didn't understand. Why would anyone build something like that? Unless they planned to use it? I turned to look at his wife, she couldn't even look back. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret. He lifted the lid. The inside was padded, neat, almost too neat. And then it hit me. That wasn't a box. That was a cell. What happened next made no sense, because part of me still wanted to believe he wouldn't really do it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His control was colder than anger, it was absolute. He said I needed to follow the rules. That I was part of something bigger. He called it the company. Every word was delusion wrapped in calmness. His wife stood by, silent, watching me from behind the stairs. When he ordered me to move closer to the box, I felt my body resist. I shook my head slightly, praying it would stop there. But he stepped closer. His presence filled the room like a shadow swallowing light. I remember thinking, if I scream, no one will ever hear me down here. The air was heavy. The world, small. And every second stretched longer than the one before. VO06. I don't remember when fear turned into numbness. At some point, I stopped shaking. Stopped asking questions. Stopped believing help would come. He stood near the box, calm and unblinking, while I stood against the wall. Every move I made felt like a test. The wife watched from the stairs, her face pale, eyes wide. When he pointed again, my body moved before my mind could. Not because I wanted to, but because survival had taken over. Inside that basement, light and darkness blended into one color, gray. The only sound was the bulb buzzing above us. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. Control doesn't always come with force, it comes with silence, and fear of what silence means. Eventually, I stepped inside the box. My breathing short, my body stiff. The walls felt closer than they should have. The air, heavy and recycled. He stood above me, expression blank. The wife turned away. I could hear the baby cry upstairs. The lid came down slowly, creaking like an old coffin. Light shrank to a sliver, then nothing. In that darkness, I stopped being a person. I became an object. A soundless thing in the corner of someone's madness. And yet, even then, a tiny thought survived in me. This won't last forever. Because no one can live like this without making a mistake. I don't know how much time passed before I saw light again. When the box opened, my eyes burned. He told me to stand. I did. He said nothing else, just watched. His wife stood nearby, her face pale, holding the baby as if it were her only reason to stay sane. My legs barely worked. Every step I took was like waking from a nightmare into another one. He told me to follow. Up the stairs, through the narrow hall, to a small room with boarded windows. A chair. A bed. No way out. But this room had something the box didn't, air. And that meant I could think again. That meant I could plan. Days blurred into each other. He became quieter, stranger. He started writing things down, symbols, names, messages to people who didn't exist. Sometimes, he'd hand me papers and tell me to sign them. Said it was for the company. His wife brought me food without speaking. I could see guilt eating her alive. One day, he forced a piece of paper on the table and told me to read it aloud. It made no sense, half sentences, delusional ramblings about orders and loyalty. When I finished, he smiled faintly. "You're part of this now," he said. But inside, I knew the truth. He wasn't building a company, he was building a prison only he understood. And the cracks in his control were starting to show. Time lost meaning. He'd talk to people who weren't there. Board windows that were already boarded. Pace the floor for hours. I cleaned when he said to. Stayed silent when he wanted quiet. But every night, I'd hear whispers through the walls, the wife, crying, apologizing under her breath. One night, she slipped into my room and closed the door halfway. Her face pale, eyes sunken. She whispered, "It's getting worse. He's losing himself." And for the first time, she looked at me not as someone trapped, but as someone who might survive. "I'll tell you when," she said. "When the chance comes, you'll run." That night, I didn't sleep. Because hope, even a whisper of it, can be louder than fear. That night felt different the moment it began. He paced the center of the room like a storm trying to form, mumbling about plans, about people who would be arriving soon. I sat in the corner, small and silent, counting his turns, 1, 2, 3, like I could outlast the weather if I just kept track. He slapped a folded paper onto the table and stared at it like it might answer back. It didn't. Nothing did. And still he talked. Later, the door opened just a crack and she slipped in, the wife, eyes red, shoulders drawn tight as if holding an invisible weight. She didn't sit. She whispered, "He's getting worse. I can't stop him." Her voice shook, but her decision didn't. When she looked at me, it was the first time she looked through fear instead of with it. I wanted to ask 100 questions. I asked none. She said, "Listen to me. Not to him. When I tell you, you run. Not later. Not after. When." Her hand hovered in the air between us, never touching, but I felt the meaning all the same. And for the first time, hope didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a plan. The house had a way of turning sound into warning. Nails settling. Doors breathing. His footsteps shaking something inside the walls. That night, the warning sounded like the softest knock and the quietest truth. She came to me again, closed the door halfway, always halfway, and told me what I needed to hear. "The company," she said, "doesn't exist." The words landed like a key in a lock I hadn't known was there. He made it up. All of it. My chest tightened, not because I doubted her, but because I believed her completely. He built a world and put us inside it, then forgot where the exits were. We spoke in fragments, the way people do when time itself might be listening. She confessed years of silence. I confessed years that felt like days, then hours, then no scale at all. "You're not safe because of his rules," she said. "You're only safe until he breaks them." I nodded. I understood. Survival would be quiet, fewer words, slower breath, smaller movements. But escape would be loud, if only inside my body. Before she left, she said one last thing, "Don't show him you know." And in that sentence was a map, truth folded into patience, patience folded into timing, timing folded into life. Morning came with a gray light that made the boards over the window look like scars. He appeared in the doorway, twitching with purpose. "Come on," he said, like this was a routine errand. I followed down the hallway, past rooms that didn't feel like rooms. Outside, the van waited, blue and ordinary, the way a trap always looks ordinary until it closes. He drove without speaking. I watched the trees blur by and tried to remember what it felt like to belong to a road and not to a person. In town, he left me in the van while life passed by on the sidewalk, laughter, coffee, keys, shoes, everything that meant nothing until it was gone. I lifted my hand to the glass and the world didn't notice. In the mirror, his eyes kept returning to me like a habit he couldn't quit. I learned something then: control and fear are twins, and both of them hate witnesses. When we turned back toward the forest, I didn't cry. I practiced breathing slow and quiet and small. If freedom was coming, it wouldn't be earned by tears. It would be earned by timing. And that timing, I could feel, had started counting down. Back at the house, the day split in two, the part where he pretended to be in charge of a future, and the part where she and I pretended not to notice it was falling apart. She came to my room at dusk, blue light cutting the floor into ribbons. She didn't waste words. "He's slipping," she said. "Worse every day. Be ready." "How will I know?" I asked. "You'll know," she said. "You'll feel it. A quiet you haven't heard before." That night I listened to the building itself. The house had a language, the stairs confessing each step, the windows swallowing the wind, the basement breathing in slow, damp sighs. Somewhere in all of that was a signal meant for me. When I slept, I dreamt of doors, some locked, some not, and the sound of a hinge moving in my favor. I woke with the taste of air that didn't belong to this place. It felt like standing on a shoreline, watching a wave form miles out. It wasn't here yet. But it was coming. And I could not afford to miss it when it broke. He grew busier with nothing. He orchestrated rooms no one would enter, assigned tasks that cleaned what was already clean, built a procession of rules that led nowhere. I did what he said. I was careful when I moved. Careful when I didn't. I kept my eyes low and my attention high. That evening, she came in with her hands pressed together like a prayer she'd already decided to answer herself. "It's close," she whispered. "He's talking to the air. He's planning expansions." The word fell between us like broken glass. She winced, then steadied. "When the door opens for you, you go. You don't ask me twice. You don't look back." I wanted to tell her I was afraid. I wanted to tell her I didn't want to do it alone. Instead, I nodded. "When?" It was the smallest word and the largest promise. In the quiet after she left, I counted my breaths and matched them to the sound of the house settling. Every exhale said the same thing: live through the next minute, the minute after that will meet you halfway. Sometimes resolve is just fear with somewhere to go. Morning peeled itself from the windows like frost. He hammered boards over the last sliver of light and stepped back to admire his work as if he'd improved the place by erasing the sky. "They're watching," he muttered, pulling curtains that no longer mattered. He didn't say who they were. He never had to. I stood at the hallway's edge, calm on the outside, measuring him on the inside. People think control looks like certainty. It doesn't. It often looks like panic holding a clipboard. She drifted near me, close enough that I could hear her breath catch. "He's fraying," she said, voice barely a shape. "It won't be long." Her hand hovered, a warning without touch. I closed my eyes for a second and pictured a road, any road, without boards, without basements, without a name I'd grown to hate. When he burst into the room again, I didn't flinch. He lectured the empty air, gestured at corners as if someone stood there taking notes. I kept still, a statue of compliance. But inside, I was a door on its hinges, rehearsing the swing. The moment we wait for is never the moment we expect. It's quieter. It arrives as a question: "Are you ready, right now?" The day he let me outside, the air nearly knocked me to my knees. I'd forgotten how oxygen could feel like a second chance. The yard was small, ringed by trees that leaned in like an audience. He watched from a few steps away, arms folded, a lighthouse built from suspicion. I knelt by a dying patch of garden and pretended to care about weeds. What I really cared about was distance: how far to the trees, how far back to the door, how far a person could get if a person didn't hesitate. She appeared on the porch, the baby quiet in her arms, and for a breath we looked at each other in a language without words. She gave the smallest nod I have ever seen. I answered with the smallest change in posture, a kind of yes that wouldn't shake the world, only the path beneath my feet. That night I lay awake, eyes open to darkness, counting possibilities. If he was losing himself, then maybe, for once, he'd lose track of me. I didn't want to win. I wanted to leave. Sometimes freedom isn't triumph. It's exit. The next morning he argued with a room that wasn't arguing back. He pulled a curtain, checked a window, stepped to the side as if letting someone invisible pass. When fear builds a theater, you can mistake performance for power. But power doesn't forget to eat. It doesn't forget to sleep. His did. She found me near the stairs and spoke with urgency that didn't rise above a whisper. Soon, she said. If I say go, you go. I nodded, throat dry, palms colder than the doorknob I kept imagining. That night the walls felt thinner, like a paper house against a coming wind. He moved below us, his voice rising and falling, scraps of sentences about signals and orders and watchers who never arrived. I lay still and listened the way one listens for thunder on a horizon, counting, waiting, measuring distance by the time between. Resolve is a quiet thing. It doesn't announce itself. It just stops asking permission. Morning arrived without his footsteps. That was the first sign. The second was the door, unlatched, a breath of air slipping through it like a secret. She appeared in the hall with a face that had already paid for the choice she was making. Now, she whispered. No speech. No instructions. Just the single mercy of timing. We moved to the back door. The house held its breath. Somewhere below, he spoke to the basement like it owed him answers. She put her hand on the wood, steadied it, steadied me. Don't come back for me, she said, and I understood it wasn't a request. It was the price. The path beyond the door looked like any other, a smear of dirt, traces of boot prints, a line of trees that had never cared about us at all. I stepped into the morning. The air was cold and good. She nodded once, the way people do when they send a part of themselves away so the rest can keep living. I didn't run at first. I walked, then faster still. When the forest opened its ribs and let me in, I let go of everything but forward. I didn't escape because I was brave. I escaped because the moment finally asked me to answer. The forest took me back like it had been saving a place for me. I stumbled, stood, stumbled again, choosing speed over grace. The light ahead found a road, just a scar of dirt, but to me it was a city of doors. I waved at the first truck I saw with both hands, tears I hadn't earned yet stinging my eyes. The driver looked at me like a person looks at a person, and I remembered what that felt like. I said, "Help," and it was enough. The truck door opened and the forest began to fall away in the mirror, a dark story shrinking into distance. At the station, I wrapped myself in a borrowed blanket and told the truth out loud until it sounded like it belonged to the world and not just to me. Paper, pens, nods, a steady voice. "You're safe now," someone said, and I believed them because I needed to. When I finally sat with my family again, their hands around mine made everything loud and quiet at the same time. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like breath arriving all the way to the bottom of my lungs. I didn't win. I lived. And sometimes that is the bravest ending there is.